Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to Facing the Gates podcast. That was just
Michael's phone.
So, as we begin the episode.
Because we actually turn our phones off for church, and then he forgets to put his phone on silent.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll forgive him for this one horrible mistake he's made, but there are many others that I will not forgive him for because he's an awful person. Okay. Anyway, we went to an Anglican church. We went to St. James Anglican this morning.
The low blue.
Yeah, there's a little subtitle underneath the bulletin heading that I didn't notice until they just pointed out because it's tiny and blue and it doesn't pop. But anyway, yeah. So I guess probably starting out, we should probably talk about the church itself and how it looks. It was a probably one of the smaller ones we've been to in terms of like the room. They also used high church language, like the Lutheran church, but in the Lutheran church it was kind of optional. You know, you didn't have to call it that. You could call it the sanctuary. You could call it the nave. In the Anglican church, they prefer to call it the nave. So you walk in, you have the narthex, and then you have the nave, and then you have the apse and the altar at the end. They didn't have a transept because it's just kind of a smaller church.
Yeah, if kind of how I like to describe it, everyone's seen the small kind of more traditional churches, especially in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that design, kind of, well, blue, little blue building, little blue church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the first thing when you walk in, you see is the stained glass.
Yeah, so that's the first thing that catches your eyes. The
big stained glass at the J-Man.
Yeah, really big, really beautiful stained glass at the end.
Oh, yeah.
It's a gigantic Jesus man standing on a tiny earth. And then they have some smaller stained glass on the side of that. And of course you have the altar at the end. And then you have your lectern. That's the
big word.
That's
lectern.
the one where they speak the words of the Bible. That's where they go to read the Bible. And the other one is the pulpit. I don't know if he called it something different. I don't
think so.
Anyway, that's where he goes to give the sermon. Kind of like the Lutheran church that we went to last year. But I noticed that it was the lectern and the pulpit were reversed on which side.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has any significance or whatnot. It's just an observation.
Yeah, and the baptismal font was on the left side.
Yeah, it was in front of the pulpit.
And he had
they said they do baptisms through sprinkling or pouring. If you prefer to do immersion, then they were like, yeah, we'll just go to another church and use theirs.
Another church or Lake Creek, kind of wherever.
Yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, he said he has used Baptist churches.
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly, but where they do their
they have
baptism.
baptismals behind the pulpit.
And he also had two different names for kind of each side. I forget exactly the two names, but it's like
well, one was the lectern, and the other one I think is just the pulpit.
But
I'm not sure what
the kind of rows.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I don't remember.
We didn't absorb everything. He gave us a little bit of a tour before we did the interview yesterday. So this is what we're remembering, which is unfortunately not everything. There was a lot of information yesterday, as you could tell from the very long episode that came out last week.
Yeah, by far our longest episode.
Yeah, it was definitely very informative, though. There was a lot of history and a lot of nuggets of information there. That was good.
Little scrumptious chicken nuggies.
Yeah, kind of like the Hardee's I had today.
Except that wasn't chicken nuggies, that was chicken.
That was a big old chicken, man. Yep, I ate Big Bird.
But yeah, I like the building because it is an older building, and I love to see older buildings still being used and appreciating their history and the architecture that went into them, and them still standing after all these years.
Yeah.
Even though he did mention there was a lightning strike that took out everything but the stained glass.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoy the older style building and the pews and all of that.
Yeah. It was, he mentioned it used to be an Episcopal church, as we talked about in the interview yesterday. There's a couple differences between the Episcopal church and the Anglican church, which is, can be confusing, which is why, for people who don't know, which is why I wanted him to kind of explain that, because basically when it started in America, it was called, once the colonies were established, it was called the Episcopal Church. And then later the Anglican Church kind of took root as the Anglican Church in America, once the Episcopal Church was doing lots of politically liberal and theologically liberal things with the church. And then, let's see, what the walls were mostly white. There was a couple windows.
And a couple small little, like ceramic type things hanging on the wall.
Yeah, they were kind of like icons, kind of, but not quite.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, like you said, tiny little ceramic artwork, basically.
And then the kind of the candles that were lit every so often on the wall. Mm-hmm. It was really a simple.
And the chandelier. Yeah,
the chandelier. Wasn't too much going on, and you could tell where the focal point of the building was meant to be.
Yeah.
Which was right down the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let a lot of natural light in through the. On the sides, the windows were kind of shuttered. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, like, as he talked about with the stained glass, when the light just hits it right, you can see the kind of gold outline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the when the sun comes through, the stained glass kind of like glows like a goldenish orange light. Yeah. It's pretty cool, because that happened towards the end of the service.
And I think this is probably one of the more low-tech type of services. It's just relying on the vocals of the preacher and of the congregation, which gave it definitely a different feel than even, say, some of the others where they did have the technology and use them. You can tell this one's very to its roots.
Yeah, though they did use a piano, electric piano.
Yeah, that's about as high tech as they're going to get, which is fine, because it's not saying that technology equals better, because sometimes it's not. It communicates something differently.
We'd be Amish if we believed that.
Yeah. The pews, there were pews, kind of like last week at the Lutheran Church. It was basically the same, wooden pews with cushions. They weren't terribly uncomfortable, but they were pews. So.
And they had kind of slightly under the pews where...
Yeah, they had kind of, I don't know what they're called, but the things you can kneel on.
And they were cushioned and...
Yeah, so certain, especially with Catholic churches, I'm pretty certain, I'm not positive on this, but they do a lot of kneeling during the service, and being that Anglican is very much close to Catholicism, that is one of the things that they've adopted from that. I'm not 100% certain on that. We'll find out when we go to the Catholic Church, but yeah, I think that's basically where that is from. No one used them, but they're there if you want to use them.
No, they're actually, I think I saw a few people.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, right. To our right, there was an older gentleman that for prayer he would kneel down.
Okay.
And he wasn't kneeling straight to the floor, so I saw, he was using that, which I mean,
gotcha.
Especially once you're older, having a little bit of cushion to kneel is probably way more comfortable.
Yeah.
forget about order for someone like me. I got bad knees. That's a
same.
necessity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did notice some people, when it came time to pray, would kneel down.
Okay.
Or for kind of certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess we can talk about the service now, because when we walked in, he told us yesterday, he was like, yeah, since it's Father's Day, there's probably going to be like 3 people there, because everybody's out of town. There was a few more than 3 people, but it was definitely not a very large congregation.
Yeah,
I would say like maybe 15 or 20 or so.
Yeah, it felt like a small, kind of close-knit congregation. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, so when we walked in, we literally talked to everybody, because when there's not very many people there, you kind of have to.
Well,
but, I mean, it was nice. I mean, they were all greeting us and welcoming us.
Yeah, and that's something that can kind of get lost in like the larger mega churches where there's cliques and this and that.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, you walk in and if there's a new person, they know there's a new person.
Right, yeah.
And so
you
they're
get
like,
welcome, good handshake or a hug or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's definitely very different than the larger churches that we've went to.
I think this was probably the smallest one that we've gone to.
So far it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was even smaller than the people, the amount of people at Pastor Trent. Because I don't think, there's not a second service for this church.
All right.
But given the area that they're in,
there's also lots of churches everywhere there.
There was a Pentecostal, Baptist.
I mean, like every block pretty much is a church.
More than every block was a church.
I mean, right across down the road was the Baptist, and right almost behind on the block was the Pentecostal.
Yeah.
And then there was the possible Catholic church.
Yeah.
At least that one building looked abandoned, but there was also another church right next to it.
Yeah. In the back of the pews, also there's your hymnal, and then the Book of Common Prayer, which he mentioned yesterday, and essentially it is their liturgical book for you to follow along during the service. Within the what is this thing called? Bulletin. I don't know why I had a brain for it. Within the bulletin, there's certain parts of the service that say refer to page so and such in the Book of Common Prayer. So you flip to the Book of Common Prayer, or refer to the hymn on this page. So, as an outsider, I will say there was a lot of flipping between books, and it was a little bit difficult for me to follow along, because there's a lot of like, all right, now we're in the hymnal. All right, now we're in the Book of Common Prayer. Now we're in the bulletin. Sermon. Now we're back in the Book of Common Prayer. And there was a lot of, there would be growing pains if I were to become Anglican, because I would have to get used to that. So it's not as, whereas with the Lutheran Church, for example, everything's in the bulletin. You can follow along with that.
Yeah, though that also could just be kind of how they proceed with the, say, like COVID measures. Mm-hmm. Because having everyone grabbing a book could, in some people's eyes, maybe raise that issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have a bulletin either way, so.
Yeah. It just probably depends.
Yeah.
Though, at least even though it was a little bit, like, sometimes where to go, at least on the back, there was for the Book of Common Prayers, like page 76, there's some Corda, 77, Sanctus, 80, Prayer Confession, the Oblation. And on the back, it kind of has a little cheat sheet for the pages you should go to. Yeah.
Which is useful, except that there's other things in the bulletin, and I didn't realize that there's a second half to the service. Yeah. I didn't realize that until
second half of the service.
Until like the last quarter of the service, I didn't realize that was there. So I mean, inside the bulletin you have like your prayer list, and then they have the readings for the day, and then they have a hymn, which I assume is just not in the hymn book, which is probably why they put that in there. But as far as the service goes, it started out With announcements, I'm pretty certain.
Yeah.
He would say the priest would say the announcements from the back of the room. I don't know if that was symbolic of anything or if he was just back there talking to people before and just decided to start there. And then we started with a hymn. And while we were singing that hymn, I think it was his son, took the big cross thing, and was walking down the aisle. Where did he take it? I wasn't following where he put it.
Well, it was brought forward and on the right side.
Okay.
If you notice where, they kind of sat right next to there on the right.
Okay,
in front of the where the one person would read
the lectern.
Yeah.
Okay, so he kind of brought it up to in front of the lectern.
In front of the altar behind the lectern.
Okay, gotcha.
Kind of hard to describe, but
yeah. If you guys look at the inside of an Anglican church, just Google a picture, and then it'll make a little bit more sense, because it's hard to describe verbally what we saw visually at all times.
Yeah, that's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, we try.
Yeah, because he brought it for at the beginning of service, and then at the end of service, he carried it.
Mm-hmm. And then there were, stuff in the Book of Common Prayer. There's a couple things there, like the Collect of Purity, the Summary of the Law, and the Kyrie, Elysion. And then they started with reading from the Old Testament. They read from Job. And then after, they read Job 38, which ironically I've quoted on the show, I think at one point. I don't remember which episode it was, but I mentioned that at some point. And then we did like a call and response Psalms, when you're referring to this, I'm pretty certain when you're referring to the Psalms as a song, it's called the Psalter. But it's basically Psalms 107, 1-3, a couple other verses.
1-3, then 23 through 32.
Yeah, and basically the priest would say the first half of the verse, and then the congregation would say the second half of the verse.
Yep. And in the pamphlet, there's an asterisk where he would do the call, and then after that, you do a response.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was a little different, but not terribly too different from the Lutheran call and response, but there was little more of it in this church.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I noticed.
Yeah. And then I feel like there was some other stuff. It was a little. I didn't follow everything that happened.
Yeah, I got a little lost myself, but there was a lot of a congregation alongside, like reading different verses and things of that nature, which was different than any of the other churches we've been to, where there's kind of that, with it being close-knit and small, they're active in the service as well.
Yeah.
And it makes a person read it.
Yeah.
Not just listen, but actually read it and kind of digest it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So then they had the Gloria Tibi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And then they had the reading from the Gospel, which was from Mark. And then they had one other reading. Oh no, they had an epistle before. They read from 2 Corinthians, and then they had the Gospel. And then he went into his sermon. So this service had 4 specific scripture readings. One was Old Testament, Job, then singing the Psalter, then an epistle, 2 Corinthians, and then the gospel, which was Mark. So that was interesting. You know, they have read the Bible more than any of the other services, I think, that we've gone to. And then he gave his sermon, and being that it was Father's Day, it was related to Father's Day. And
kind of fatherhood and kind of the position that a father should take.
Yeah.
And kind of few things that make a good father or good man in general.
Right.
As he said.
So basically he was... he did also reference lots of other Bible verses, though he didn't... Though they weren't part of, like, the reading. He referenced, like, Ezekiel. He also referenced Wisdom of Sirach, which is part of the Deuterocanon or the Apocrypha, the long canon of the Old Testament, which I have not read yet, but I plan to. And it sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty wisdomy. So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that one when I read it.
Bailey's going to come in and spit some hot facts to us about it.
And then we experienced something we have not yet experienced at a service yet.
What was that?
The breaking of bread.
The communion. Oh, I was going to get to that in a little bit because that was towards the end. I was going to talk about the sermon because obviously it was interesting. We all have thoughts.
Appreciate the book.
Yeah. Well, that was later. That was later.
But
Not spoilers.
It goes with the sermon. The book does.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I like that he referenced other Bible portions, parts of the Bible, to kind of convey his message more. And it was a little bit of like a cultural criticism, kind of, on how a lot of times people don't know how to, like, own up to their actions and take responsibility. And he's kind of like, hey, men need to step it up. And he's like, well, there's some men in this congregation that are doing a good job of that.
Yeah.
But still, like, he did kind of a joking little list of translating what men say. He's like, I'm even guilty of this one.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
honey, I don't know where it's at, AK. If it's not in my outreached hand, have no clue.
Yeah, which, I mean, I can respect that because it's, again, he is just as faulty as all of us.
Yeah.
Which, because, you know, a lot of people will try to do here's what you need to do, and it's like, well...
It kind of comes off as holier than thou.
Yeah, where kind of how he did it, how his approach, it was more, here's what we can all work on.
Yeah, and I like that he, like you said, he was not afraid to mention, like, hey, this is where I have slipped up myself. So...
Yeah, and one thing that I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but he used the kind of more modern version of father. Not necessarily one of same blood, but one of upbringing, one of structure, and one of credibility and responsibility.
Because he did say, even in the Bible, some of the greatest fathers were not blood related.
Yeah, and in the Bible, the familial terms isn't always as binary in blood like we use it today.
Yeah, but there was a sector of time pre-modern where father was blood, mother was blood, and the viewing that a family construct doesn't have to necessarily all be blood related. It's who takes that responsibility, who owns up to it and does the best they can. That I appreciated that.
Yeah, the one who tries to take care and guide.
Yeah.
Would be the father figure or the mother figure in that aspect, which especially nowadays, where it kind of, especially in like America, high divorce rates, high single parents. It's something that, like, some people in community might be the father figure, or like their mentor, someone that takes that higher stance and tries to lead.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of little thing that he made sure kind of to state.
Yeah. I'm a little torn on his sermon. Like, I liked it. I got the message he was getting across. And I think it had a good variety of talking points between going from the Bible to culture to a couple dry humor jokes, and kind of like, it was, I think the way he did it, it was kind of like somewhat like the Pentecostal pastor, but it made sense. Like, he had like the elements of like a lot of talking points and kind of weaving his way in between them and making sense of it, but it made sense instead of just,
and he had verses to back it up.
Yeah, it wasn't like just
Spewing.
vomiting out random things. But yeah, I liked it, but I think it was a little, I am kind of, because this may be a topic for a different day, but and obviously we're going to talk about the broader spectrum of politics at some point, and how that interacts with Christianity and whatnot.
You'll get to hear our hot political.
That's gonna be a saucy boy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But
I mean, most people
little,
can guess behind.
I'm a little torn because, like, I understand there are political implications to being a Christian, but at the same time, I don't know that the pulpit is the place to be preaching politics. Now, he wasn't completely preaching politics. He was kind of just criticizing culture to some degree. He wasn't advocating policy or party or anything like that.
He wasn't going, this party's right. He was more
he was just saying
society as a whole.
Yeah, he was just like, them soy boys are really ruining America. I don't know.
But one thing I will say, that this is a type of service where I feel to know if it's for you or not, you'd have to go a couple times and get a more broader view instead of our pinpoint view.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
And I'd say that for a lot of the more where...
Because it took, like, even when we came out of the service, I was like, hey, Michael, what do you think? And he's like, I need a minute to think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, and I was the same way, because I was like, I can't put it, because usually when we leave a church service, we're like, okay, I thought this about this, and we have like a whole conversation. Whereas this one, we had to kind of let it stew for a little
Kind
bit.
of digest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas our least favorite ones, we
had thoughts.
instant.
Yeah.
Where the more traditional ones kind of have to sit there and think.
And digest it a little bit more.
Yeah, digest it.
Yeah.
And that's something I'd say with Pastor Trent's church or the Lutheran church.
Mm-hmm.
Those are ones you definitely, to get a feel if it's for you, would need to visit a couple times.
Yeah.
And I'd recommend talking with these preachers if you're looking or considering, because I think that really helps. And that's a pleasure that we get to do, is talk and understand the history and their background, why they chose this denomination.
Context is key.
Yeah, context is key.
Mm-hmm. And also, say the church ain't quite for you. Well, you could probably have a conversation like, hey, any recommendations, because I'm trying to find this or this specific, and get help with your own research.
Yeah, there's going to be a certain crowd that is like, well, you shouldn't go church shopping. Well, in reality,
It's
like,
not,
for me, my perspective is, I don't want to be church hopping. So I don't want to just join a church just to join a church and then realize 2 months later it's not really a healthy church to join, or there's certain problems or theological issues. So I would much rather take my time in deciding where I belong theologically, and then, because I want whatever church branch that I join to be my church home, that I don't migrate from in 2 years.
And you want to build
You want
become a part of, say, the church family.
I want to be a part of that community, and I want to know that that's the place where I belong.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just, because if I just went to some church down the street, I'm sure people would welcome me, but at the same time, it's kind of like, because looking at things from a denominational level is kind of like looking at all the world religions and saying, which one do you believe in?
I'd like to akin it to finding a partner in life.
Yeah.
You're not going to just meet one person and that'd be it.
Yeah.
And you just go, first one I see, that's when I'm putting a ring on. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
And I think the term church shopping doesn't do what you're doing justice, because
plus it's a good experience for us to go to these different types of churches. I think people should do that just to see what it's like.
It's not like you're hopping from Baptist to Baptist church to see who rubs you the right way or this or that or who's got the best performance. You're going not only for what you perceive, but also theological perspective, certain aspects like Calvinist, non-Calvinist, traditional, non-traditional. You're looking at the whole picture instead of just church shopping one type of church back to back to back to see what satisfies your earthly needs instead of your spiritual needs.
So,
right.
In another way, it's like trying to decide which way you're going to cook your chicken. You want barbecue, you want Chinese food, so like sesame chicken, maybe some orange chicken, maybe some fried chicken.
Yeah.
Maybe just simple rosemary and some salt.
Yeah.
And some butter.
You heard it here first. Choosing your church is like choosing what kind of chicken you want.
Because think of like the chicken as the core, and everything else is kind of the tradition, the other kind of things that go with it.
Yeah.
So barbecue sauce is like Calvinism is what you're saying.
I don't know. It's just kind of a digestible way to kind of see it. The core is there, but it's kind of how everything interacts with it.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but it kind of sounds jackassery.
Yeah, it's okay.
I don't know. It's the first way to describe it that popped in my head.
Yeah, but you're not going to stick to cooking one type of chicken the rest of your life. Whereas if you find a wife,
I don't know.
Your goal is till death do we part. If you find a church home, your goal is till death do we part. Is how I look at it.
Yeah, kind of. And that's not to say that, like, maximum pressure, your next church has to be your final church. Yeah. Like,
people grow and evolve. And
right, but
don't get into it for shallow reasons. Get into it for the right reasons.
Right, yeah, just kind of think it out.
Take your time.
Don't be like, I like the, that they, I like their wallpaper and the stained glass. Well, those are decent reasons. But, like, still, like, I think the theological things are like the core.
It has to be spiritually fulfilling.
Right.
And it has to help answer questions that you may have. And you also have to feel like the preacher isn't, that he is in high regards, but he's just the man. And that he is reachable.
That he remains humble and he has humility.
And is willing to do that outreach and that talking and that learning and welcome you into the fold instead of keeping distant.
Yeah, which I think Father Russell has done when he greeted us and talked to us.
Heck, at the end of the interview, once we were leaving, he gave us all a hug, and it's like,
yeah, we talked before and after the interview, and then we talked a little bit before and after church today. So he was very welcoming. But yeah, and then they had communion, which was
the first
for
the Facing the Gates podcast.
Yeah, the first communion. Even though a lot of the churches like do it fairly frequently, we've just happened to go when they don't have it.
Yeah, like the Lutheran Church, he wants to start doing it every week. But
Yeah, they
right
do it
now,
like every other week, and we went. the
yeah,
week that they
or
didn't.
important dates.
Right.
Though hopefully they can get that back up and running, because I think that'd be a nice thing to have.
Yeah, so I think a good chunk of the service was preparing for communion. I think his sermon was maybe like 20 minutes or so, something like that. And then they recited the Nicene Creed. And then there was a couple other things that they were mostly in the Book of Common Prayer, and some call and response things with the priest would say something and then the congregation would say something in response. Things like there was like the invocation, the Lord's Prayer, prayer of humble access, lots of things prepping for communion. If you want to know all the gory details, go to an Anglican church.
Yeah, seriously.
It was an interesting experience. And then towards the end, the priest served communion and basically called all baptized Christians to come to the front. And they kind of put down a cushion and they closed the rail behind in front of the altar. So I think it's kind of the same thing with like the symbolism of like the high
holies
priest.
of holies.
Right, yeah.
And if you ain't careful, zap.
Yeah. Except that you're not going to get zapped now. So
Yeah, nowadays.
that's
But
good.
Back in the day, ooh,
Yeah,
They
so
But I still wouldn't want to test that.
they tie a rope to your leg just in case.
you got zapped.
No, in case the
Pull you on
person,
in.
in case he died, so they don't go in and get zapped.
Yeah. So there was basically there would be a couple people. They would kind of kneel at the rail. He would hand them the
Bread.
I guess the bread. Not sure the difference between leavened and unleavened bread, so I'm not going to be able to get into that for the theology nerds about that.
But
Sorry.
it's bread.
It's a little round wafer thing. You eat that, and then he passed out trays of little tiny glasses of wine for everybody. And then you drink that, and then throw it in the trash on the way down. And I think that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and I like that it was for any baptized Christian, not necessarily Anglican, not necessarily Lutheran. As long as you are a Christian, you were welcome to come get communion, and we were welcome to come up.
Yeah, being that, because I meant to ask him this yesterday, but I ended up texting him later just to make sure. Michael and David were welcome to come up, but being that they are not baptized Christians, they would have to kind of cross their arms over their chest, and then he would kind of bless them, but he would not be able to give them communion, basically.
And we wouldn't be the type to go up there to take it in the
Just
lie.
be,
Yeah, well,
'Cause
we just talked to him yesterday, so he knows.
But
I mean, in general, that would have just been disrespectful for like, yeah, just give me the wine.
Yeah, they he said he goes off the honor code. I don't remember how much of this was mentioned in the interview. Because there was a lot of conversation that happened.
we easily talked yesterday for over 3 hours, and
Yeah.
as long as the podcast says, there was even more discussions, which is very, very good.
Yeah. So after communion, he basically there was a couple other things from the Book of Common Prayer, like the prayer of thanksgiving, Gloria in Excelsis, and the benediction. And then he kind of dismissed us, and we kind of people were telling us bye and appreciated us for coming.
We
and that kind
met
of
the
thing.
last person we didn't get to be able to be introduced.
Yeah, so we have I think we literally met everyone. Everyone there. Which, I mean, it's fine because there weren't that many people.
From the youngest to the oldest, everyone made sure to stop by.
And then we went and got food. And so I guess before we talk about anything with the interview, what were your guys' thoughts on the service itself?
It was a little foreign, but with the experience of the other services we have done, it wasn't too foreign.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you went from Baptist to Catholic.
Yeah.
Or no,
It's
Baptist like Greek Orthodox,
Yeah, it's like we've kind of dipped our toes in the traditional sense.
and we're going deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all in all, enjoyable service. Once, if we were to go back, it wouldn't probably be as hard to keep up
Yeah.
because there, as you've mentioned, there would be major growing pains and kind of getting the flow of everything
Yeah.
and being able to prep, because you could tell there were some people there. If you could not drive your truck that loud, sir.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But there were some people
disruptions.
who were automatically on it, just in the book,
Or
already
some
knew where to
people
go.
that say like the Nicene Creed, or how, I forget.
Probably Nicene Creed.
The Nicene Creed, some
of them probably just memorized it because you say it every week.
Yeah.
and so stuff like that you would kind of start to memorize, and then the stuff that pops up differently every week, you'd be like, okay, I'm on it.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I agree. It was a little jarring to get used to flipping between the different books and the hymnal and the
Book of Common Prayer, Bulletin.
Why do I keep forgetting what that's called? It's literally, I've said it a million times.
We've said it every episode.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. No, that's
so
also us coming from a more contemporary kind of background where you're lucky if you even get to open up your Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a little, just as an outsider, it was a little confusing, just kind of jumping between this, and this, and following along. But it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like I have no idea what's happening. It was like, okay, I can kind of follow along. Got a little lost in some places, but
It's not like they were reading to us in Hebrew or Latin where we were just like, what?
Yeah. No, he also made sure to, especially when they grab the book, what page you can find it on.
yeah. And there are
stuff like
parts
that.
where Father Russell would say, hey, this is on page such and such of Book of Common Prayer, and so
Yeah, but all in
Which,
all,
especially coming in there new, really helpful.
yes.
yeah. It was a different but enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are someone who, say, has been raised Baptist your whole life or Methodist, or even if you don't convert, but experience these things so you can understand kind of where all of this comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been definitely it's beneficial for me, but I know it's definitely beneficial for you because, you may not know a lot of what we're learning in the interviews, so it's definitely,
And like
it's useful.
being able to experience some of like the traditional stuff, because as we said, Baptist, and we also, Mike and I grew up going to a Methodist church.
Yeah,
And the
Anglicans.
Methodist church, it did have a hymnal and it did have the Bible. Those were,
Yeah,
at least from what I remember.
right. The Anglican Church is kind of like Catholicism light.
I was about
basically.
to say that.
Yeah.
I was about to say
It's
diet Catholicism.
Yeah. If you're looking for something that's basically Catholic, but with the core tenets of Protestantism, like the solas and that kind of thing, Anglicanism is probably. And if you want like the historical tradition and stuff like that, I forgot to ask him if the Anglican Church is the true church, but
Well, it said in the creed, it said the Catholic Church, and it starts with an A.
the apostolic
Yep.
succession. Yeah.
Or- Something like that with church at the end.
The one church. Dun, dun, dun.
So I would expect so.
I imagine they would be like, yeah, we picked up where those dirty Catholics left off.
Yeah, but I also appreciate that he didn't hold the whole judgment upon people of other denominations.
Right.
Yeah.
He mentioned that after, I don't think it was, because he mentioned that after the interview. He was like, I wasn't trying to slander other groups. I was just saying, like, he's just trying to compare and contrast, because I guess he thought it could have sounded a little pejorative with how much he was talking about what this group does and that group does. But, I mean, it helps for contrast to understand.
He's kind of short of how he sees it. It's like, I believe this church is the right church, but we're all in the same group. We're on the same team.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, which, as an outsider and going to a lot of small South Carolina churches, a lot of them do not think that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of infighting in Christianity, and it's nice to see someone who feels that Anglicanism is how they're meant to serve and worship, but doesn't cast judgment upon someone else for how they worship.
Yeah.
And obviously he welcomed the three of us coming into his church and experiencing it. And that says a lot.
Yeah. He also, at the end, I forgot to mention, he called it Mass.
Yes.
This Mass is concluded. So it was a very basically high church Anglican service, but it was a small place. So it's typically when people think high church, they think like cathedrals and regality and all that.
Just a small little church in South.
Yeah.
Though I do kind of like the smaller churches because it's a little more intimate.
Yeah.
More, it seems to me at least a bit more peaceful, but that's also just probably my anxiety around lots of people going on.
Yeah. So what about was there anything we wanted to talk about with the interview? Because I really appreciated, because I knew about like the basic history of like King Henry and stuff, but I liked how he kind of mentioned that it was a movement that had been growing within the Catholic Church for a few centuries.
I don't want to be that guy, but seriously, just go. If you guys want to, this is one of the interviews where if you really want to know about the interview, go watch the interview.
Yeah.
Because there's so much.
There's a lot of information
for us
there
to break down that we're not going to necessarily do it justice. So seriously, when this episode is finished, if you have not,
go listen to that interview. It was very
seriously. And
he in the interview even said, well, I forget which question, but I was thinking about that one a lot last night.
I think it was our science and religion at odds.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a good conversation. There was a lot of good information there.
And plus, he didn't come into it with I have all the answers.
Yeah.
He came into it with this is what I believe, but I could always be wrong. I'm not going to put a limit on a limitless being.
Right.
For all I know, it could be this or that or this, and I respect that because honestly, none of us know all the answers. There's going to be things that we're unable to tell you because we weren't around.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that everything doesn't have to be at odds.
Other
Yeah.
than that,
he
after his sermon, he handed out to kind of all the men, young,
yeah, since
old,
it was Father's Day, he got the altar boys to hand out
the Bible in 366 Days for Men of Faith by Angus Buckham.
Yeah, I think it's like a devotional, daily devotional type thing.
Kind of goes through Genesis through Revelations with little passages and kind of little notes of like for the first day, it's like experience the colors, fragrances, and sounds of creation and enjoy them anew every day. So kind of little things to think about, passages.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that's especially for a church, really nice little thing because, I mean, most people probably know most people aren't going to read the Bible. But
Yeah.
Maybe take this, read a little bit every day, and here's with the little passage. Oh, here's kind of how you can do this. Maybe pay attention to like nature and stuff like that.
Yeah. Or Christians could, like, just read the Bible.
Yeah.
Some people don't like to do that, but I mean, there are parts that are like, okay, this is kind of boring, but it's important to learn
and know what you believe in.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, I've been slowly working through. I'm reading from the beginning. I just got through Leviticus, and Leviticus is a slog, let me tell you. But
It's a big book.
Yeah, well, it's actually, I mean, it's not as big as like Genesis and Exodus.
But I'm talking about the Bible in general. It's a
definitely.
bunch of big books put together.
Especially because I'm reading the longer canon of the Old Testament, it adds like an extra third.
Oh.
So it'll probably be like another year or two before I'm done. But
yep, and
I'm reading a little bit every night.
So you're in for a hoot and a holler.
I forget if it was at the end of the interview or after the interview. He handed us a few books. He handed me a book by Alistair McGrath, and he handed Bailey.
Yeah, he handed David. I don't know. I don't remember. I can't remember what was in the interview and what wasn't. But I'm pretty certain this was in the interview.
Yeah.
He handed you a book,
Twilight of Atheism by Alistair McGrath. So
yeah,
I have to give that a.
Yeah, I'm gonna force David to read it, and then we're gonna do an episode on what he learned or what he didn't learn.
Well, you better do we better combine them so you can the book you were given.
Oh, well, so what he gave us, the 39 articles, and I think the smaller catechism. It's in my bag, but he gave us one of the basically like their the formulation of their theological views, kind of like Pastor Trent gave us the larger and smaller catechism.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it was. I meant to look through it a little bit last night, but I didn't have the chance.
No, I do like that. Like, for like, yeah, you might like this, or you might learn something from this. It's like, okay, yeah, you've done your homework.
Mm-hmm.
And I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he wanted to kind of extend that hand, like, hey, you can learn something. I can learn something. Just kind of that sentiment. It's really, really nice and refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else?
Go watch the interview.
Yeah, go listen to the interview.
Go watch it on what was that one that you told me we got a bunch of listens on?
Bullhorn.
Bullhorn. Go watch it on Bullhorn.
Listen.
That exists.
I didn't either. But we got like a bunch of listens on Bullhorn randomly, so I was like, yeah.
Go listen on Spotify, Podbean, Bullhorn, YouTube, Twitter, Pandora.
Apple Podcast. It's not on Twitter. I mean, our social media is on Twitter. Facing the Gates, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Follow. You can email us at facingthegatespod@gmail.com if you have comments or questions or concerns or memes. Those are acceptable also. We haven't gotten any memes, unfortunately. So I have dunked on all of us when we took a picture for the social media, and then I made memes out of our faces. So that was pretty fun. Maybe that'll come on social media one day. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Is there anything else we need to mention?
Wasn't really that super long of a service. Not the kind of.
It's a little over an hour, I think.
Yeah,
like an hour and 15
at most. But it's not something that because it
wasn't a slog to get through like Leviticus.
Yeah. Well, kind of as we said, some churches.
One of the churches felt like a slog to get through.
Yeah.
But all in all, it was a enjoyable, different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of nice to see things from different cultural viewpoints and all that fun stuff. So give your local Anglican Church a shot. See if it's for you. Just try it out, man. Yeah,
so if this week was Catholicism Light, next week we're getting the real deal. We're going to a Catholic church.
Dun, dun, dun.
We're going to interview a Catholic priest. Yeah! It's going to be pretty neat. And you guys should definitely listen, because it'll be... He's got some interesting things to say, probably. These next couple of interviews we're going to do are probably going to be long, because there's lots of history that they will hopefully unwind and talk about.
I love it. I love when it's like a minute of Michael talking in the whole interview and just like 2 hours of someone who has the information giving the information. And
Yeah.
so please, I hope it's long.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And then I've never gone to a Catholic mass, so I've never been to most of these churches, but Catholicism is kind of a big portion of Christianity, so it'll be very interesting to see what that is like. And
The Vatican's a huge player in the world.
Yeah, so
and see what's crack-a-lacking with them guys over there.
We should watch some more Catholic TV.
yeah. So
I'll never forget about that one.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. Was there any, I've asked if there's anything else. That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Love you guys.
Yeah, it's been real.
It's been fun.
It's been real fun.
We'll see you guys next week. Love y'all.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Stop it.